We're talking today with Barry Hillmer of Caledonia, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Barry, start off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Flushing, Queens, May 3rd, 1946. That's New York.
That's New York City. All right. And did you grow up there, or did you move around?
Grew up on Long Island, Nassau County, New Hyde Park.
Okay.
And lived there until I went off to college.
Okay. Now, what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My mother was a school teacher, elementary school teacher. My dad worked for Bell Telephone in New York City.
Okay. Now, had he served in the war, or was he a civilian?
He was in the Second World War in New Guinea and Australia.
Okay. And what service branch, or what was he doing?
He was in the Air Force. He was a crew chief.
Okay. All right. So I've interviewed a fair number of people who were in New Guinea World War II, so I hear that.
Yeah.
I always want to go, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And as you're born in, okay, so 46, so when do you finish high school?
1964.
Okay. And then where did you go to college?
Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania.
All right. And what was that school like at that point in time?
It was all male, 1,700 guys. And what motivated me, it had a very good educational rating, and it had an ROTC program. At one point in high school, I thought I might want to make the military a career. I thought about going to West Point. And this was a nice alternative without making that much of a military commitment.
All right. And of course, you're thinking about that. I mean, that's the point before Vietnam heated up and we didn't have a lot of people going over there.
Well, we did.
Well, we had some people, but we didn't have them like we had them later.
Well, the draft and at the time, pretty much, you made the assumption that you most likely would be going to Vietnam if you got drafted.
Okay.
So I made the decision with ROTC. It was the first 2 years were mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
The second 2 years were voluntary, but I liked the format. I liked the training that I was getting, and decided, all right, if I have to go in the Army, I want to have some control over my destiny.
Right.
And ROTC allowed me that.
Yeah. Because in '64 we didn't have ground troops.
Well,
there.
it was '68 when I got out.
Yeah, well, you got out, and in '66 is the point when you make the commitment to do the next 2 years, and by '66, the draft was really going.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's when you initially go in, it would have been a possibility. There was a draft at the time, but they were not taking huge numbers of people then.
Yes.
But very quickly it ramps up during those first 2 years when you're in college.
Yes.
At that point.
Yes.
All right. So while you were in college, how much did you learn about what was going on in Vietnam?
Quite a bit. We, because you were going to class every day, and RTC, you had that instruction that was part of the curriculum, regular part of the curriculum. So you were kept pretty well informed about what was going on. And again, at the end of the first 2 years, I just came to the conclusion, all right, if I'm going to Vietnam, number one, I want to go as an officer. And second of all, if I have some choice about branch or MOS and what area of specialization I was going into, then I wanted to be able to do that. ROTC allowed you, they gave you 3 options, first, second, third choice. And fortunately, I got my first choice, which was intelligence. So.
Okay. Now, was this a point when the third choice had to be infantry?
No.
Okay.
No, but as if there was a drawback to going in as an intelligence, your primary was intelligence, 9301 MOS. Your secondary was infantry. That was required. So you had to go through infantry basic.
All right. So what did the ROTC program consist of?
It was you had classroom work, and then at the end of your junior year, you had to go through 8 weeks of summer camp, which was essentially basic training. 8 weeks of basic training.
Okay, and where did
infantry?
Right. Where did you do that?
Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And what was that like?
That was brutal. That was pushing the limits. I mean, that was going through basic training, and so here you are. You're giving your summer up, and 8 weeks, they pushed you to the limits. I mean, you were in barracks. You were, at that point, we weren't officers. We hadn't been commissioned. And we had a staff sergeant that was our platoon, oversaw the platoon. And so you were a grunt, and you were running around there, and 8 weeks of some pretty intense infantry training.
So what were they actually teaching you? I mean,
Everything.
what's the curriculum?
Every aspect of what they'd run you through with basic training as an infantryman.
Okay. What I'm getting at is most people today don't go in the service and don't even know what that involves. So just day to day there, what are you doing?
Well, they'd have these different segments. So you'd have a marksmanship segment, working with rifles. You did mortars. You did all weaponry. You did map reading, orientation. There was a week of hand-to-hand combat. I mean, and each one was a segment. So it might be a week or two, depending upon how much was required.
Okay. Was there a lot of close order drill?
Yes.
Okay. And had you learned some of that already from
Yes.
ROTC? Yeah.
Yes, we did that every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then what did they do when people messed up?
At Indian Time
Yeah.
Gap? Well, we in our barracks, we had 4 squads. It was a platoon barracks, 4 squads, so you had 10 men. Every one of us made it through that.
Mm-hmm.
So there weren't many that did not. I think under those circumstances, you had already committed. You went through the freshman and sophomore year. You had completed your junior year, and it was then that you went to summer camp. You were pretty dedicated and committed to military.
Okay. So nobody's washing out. But,
Not really.
But
no.
then, I guess, but you would do things wrong
Yeah.
on occasion. So,
Yeah.
And normally, I guess, in regular basic training, there's an awful lot of discipline and punishment and stuff if people screw up in one way or another.
Push-ups.
Okay.
I was doing 100, 150 push-ups a day. That was the way you got through it. I mean, you just, because some of it was just ridiculous, and some of the things that you were being asked to do and everything else, and the way you kind of got through it was, all right, I'll do this, but, all right, so it was, okay.
Okay. And did you understand what they were doing and why they were doing it?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, some of it seemed excessive, some of it seemed absurd, but you realize in the end they were trying to form a cohesive unit,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately, it was bringing a group of individuals that didn't know one another together as a team.
Mm-hmm. And so you could function automatically.
Yes.
Do what you had to do.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you were going through that, did any of the instructors make any reference to what was happening in Vietnam, or was this more general?
Not really. No, that was pretty much just that part was just focused on the physical preparation training.
Okay. Okay, so when did you graduate from college?
1968.
All right. And now, at this point, you've completed ROTC.
Right.
Okay, so what happens to you now with the military?
I had a commitment from Sears Roebuck, a management training position with them, and the military gave you up to a year before you had to go on active duty.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to get a year extension from my graduation, completed a year, and the beauty at that time was the company that you went to work for had to give you a commitment that when you completed the 2 years that you would return to the same position that you had when you left.
All right. So when do you actually receive your commission?
As soon as we had graduation, the next step was commissioning.
Okay, so now at this point you're a second lieutenant.
Yes.
But now do you go from there now to work for Sears for
Yes.
a year? Okay, so you do that before you get any more officer training with
Exactly.
the Army.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so where were you living for that year?
Pittsburgh.
Okay, all right. And so where then do you go once you finish that? I guess first of all, that's a pretty interesting year because 68 into 69.
Yes.
I mean, Martin Luther King had already been assassinated in the spring,
Yes.
Which might not have had too much of a repercussion in eastern Pennsylvania. I don't know.
Yeah, that's correct.
But then you had, Johnson had announced he wasn't running. You had the presidential election going on. Then you had the Democratic convention and the riots in Chicago. You had Bobby Kennedy getting assassinated. A lot of stuff was going on in that period.
Yes.
And so you're watching this as a temporary civilian, knowing you're going in the Army.
Right.
So what's going through your head at that point?
Yeah, initially I was supposed to go in January, and so I graduated in May, and actually started for Sears in September.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked at a pool lifeguard through the summer. So I realized this is it. This is going to be my last hurrah.
Yeah.
Went to work for Sears in September, and it was a much more enjoyable, much more rewarding experience than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote, and the Army gave me an extension then. So rather than going in January, which I was supposed to do, they extended me out. A year was the longest that you could delay going in on active duty. So they extended that until June, and I was happy. I think it gave me an opportunity to mature, gave me a lot of training, management training, and other experience prior to actually rather than just going from college into the military. So.
All right. So now you get to June of '69. Now you're going in, for real.
Yes.
So what do you do next?
Fort Benning, Georgia, and again it was. I don't want to say it was an exact repeat, but again, it was infantry. That was infantry officer basic training. And so I had 8 weeks of a repeat to some degree of what I had at Indiantown Gap.
Okay. Now this time around, is there more directly relating to Vietnam?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, there's more because, number one, the time factor, and Tet of '68 had occurred. So, I mean, it was, as a matter of fact, I didn't realize it, but by requesting intelligence, you were essentially asking to go to Vietnam, because at the time that I arrived in '69, there were more intelligence officers in Vietnam than there were infantry officers in Vietnam. So the training was more geared to Southeast Asia, that experience, what that preparation was going to be. But it wasn't until the intelligence training in Fort Holabird where they really started focusing on Vietnam.
Okay. Now while you were at Fort Benning, let's see, did they take you into swamps, or did you just stay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the areas, now that was the summer in Georgia, but the issues that we had were the temperatures. They would shut down the training exercises when the temperature would hit 95 degrees, and it quite often hit 95 in the afternoon. And we were getting up at 4:30 in the morning to be able to do calisthenics and exercises in the dark, just so that they could get that in prior to the temperature rising. It'd be in the 80s.
Of course, if they were going to send you to Vietnam, you want to get used to that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
I know it.
All right.
Yeah.
And then, but did they do it all kind of at the facilities at Fort Benning, or did they take you off?
It's all Fort Benning.
Oh, okay, so they weren't taking you into the Okefenokee Swamp or up to Dahlonega?
No, but there were enough areas that were somewhat indicative of what not where I was in the Delta, but certainly indicative of areas of Vietnam.
All right. And then, and how long was that at Fort Benning?
8 weeks.
It's still just 8 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
Not a 6-month school or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, how long was your actual active duty commitment?
It was a 2-year commitment.
Okay. All right. So yeah, they need to move you through pretty quickly so they can
Yes.
use you. So you do your 8 weeks at Fort Benning, and then Fort Holabird, Maryland is the next stop?
Yes.
Okay. And what are you getting there?
It's the intelligence training. There were two, it was 8 weeks, but it was 2 4-week segments. One was specifically focused on MACV and all the elements of intelligence and preparing you to be an intelligence officer as far as briefings and gathering intelligence and everything that you would do. And then it was preparing you for Vietnam.
Okay. Explain what MACV is.
Military Assistance Command Vietnam. And so we were advisors. So, and it's kind of a dubious term, because the reality was I had a counterpart, a Vietnamese counterpart. Each one of us on we were a 3-man team. It was a captain, supposedly a captain slot, but for most of my time in Vietnam, it was a lieutenant. So there were 2 lieutenants and an NCO, and then at times we would have an enlisted man that would do a lot of the recording of the data and intelligence. But essentially, we were a 3-man team, and then there was we were directly associated with a Vietnamese intelligence group team. So I had a counterpart, and
Okay. We'll get into that more later once we
Okay.
get you over to Vietnam. But basically, but you were basically you were being prepared to work in that kind of slot or assignment with that. All
well,
right.
to some degree, it was. I think each one of us, we had individual experiences, and you had no idea exactly what your responsibility was going to be.
Okay. And then you said the sort of that second phase, you're kind of learning about Vietnam. What
Yes.
are you learning there?
Yes, it was about everything from the government to the enemy situation to what particular positions or possible positions we might actually have to assume. So it was rather extensive.
Okay.
It was a daily, it was 6 days a week, and they were pumping us through at that time. So my session was from 6 in the morning until noon, and then there was another group that started at 1 in the afternoon and went until 7. And we did that 6 days a week for 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah, that was rather intense.
All right. So once you get through that, now what happens?
Then you had a month of leave, and then you got on a plane and you flew to Vietnam.
Okay. So when do they send you to Vietnam?
It was November. I arrived in about a week before, not even, a few days before Thanksgiving.
Okay, of 1969.
69.
Okay. All right. Now, how do they get you physically to Vietnam?
Well, you got orders and requisitions to be able to fly. I flew commercially to San Francisco, and then flew outside of San Francisco. We
Right.
had a
Yeah.
flight that went over.
And were you in a chartered civilian aircraft? Or
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pan Am.
All right. And do you remember where you stopped on the way over?
Yeah, we went to Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay.
And then into Yokota, Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and then Japan, Yokota to Saigon.
Okay. So did you land at Tan Son Nhut, the big
Yes.
airport there? Okay.
Yes,
And did you come in during the day or at night?
during the day.
Okay. So what's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
You have all this anticipation. You're on a commercial airline or Pan Am, as if you're going on vacation or you're going on a trip. And they open the door, and the last thing you say to the flight attendant, "See you in a year." You're trying to think of something,
Mm-hmm.
from an amusing standpoint, light. And you walk down the steps, and it's, they didn't have ramps. So you
Mhm.
walk down the steps, and the first thing you notice are coffins. All these wooden coffins in the plane next to you that they're loading up. That's your first reality check that, okay, I'm in Vietnam, I'm in a war zone, and okay. So
All right. And then, so you get off the plane. Now what do they do with you?
well, you go through the in-processing, and then it was my roommate and myself, and turned out that in his processing, the assignment that he got, he went as far north as you could go in Vietnam, and I was assigned to go as far south as you could go in Vietnam. So I was in Saigon maybe a day or two,
Mhm.
and then they found I flew to. They put me on military aircraft, flew down to Can Tho, which is the capital of Delta.
Mm-hmm.
Spent 2-3 days there with processing, and then it wasn't until I got to Can Tho that I found out specifically what my assignment was going to be.
Okay. So what was the assignment?
Well, I was going to An Xuyen Province, Camau, and they didn't exactly say because at province level, and then you had in An Xuyen we had 6 districts, and you had district team, which was a 10-man team, and so I could have initially I was assigned to be in one of these district teams. But I got to Camau, and one of the lieutenants in the S2 shop at Province had only a month or 2 to go, and I hit it off with the S3. And so he said, "You know what? I think we could use you here. I think we're going to keep you here."
Okay. Explain what S2 and S3 are.
Well, S2, in the Army breaks it down. S1 essentially is personnel. That officer oversees personnel and manages that. S2, I manage the intelligence aspect, the intelligence gathering and dissemination of information. S3 is pretty much operations, runs the operations, makes sure that this advisory team is well coordinated. And then there's S4, which is supply.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was
Okay. So you were assigned to a specific unit or something with a number or designation?
Advisory Team 80
Okay.
was the team in
All right.
Can Tho.
Okay. And describe a little bit just that physical area that you're in. What kind of landscape is there?
It's rice paddies. I mean, you're when I was told where I was going, of course you have no idea. And so when I went out to the airfield in Can Tho, and I flew down in a Caribou, and the pilot said to me, "So where are we leaving you?" I said, "Kamau." He said, "Oh, good luck, buddy." It was known as a hot area, hot sector. So you fly down there and you make a number of different stops in these different provinces, and then they finally get to Kamau, and the ramp comes down. You walk out, and all you see is one little building with some Vietnamese running around. No Americans, no anything. You don't know whether to take a prone position with your rifle. You don't know what to do, honestly. The ramp goes up, the plane takes off, and there you are, wondering, all right, where do I go now? What happens next? So I went up to the building, and of course they're all Vietnamese, and nobody spoke English. So I thought, all right, I'll just bide my time here. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, all of a sudden a Jeep comes out, and it was from the orderly room, and they were picking up the mail, the sacks of mail, whatever had been dropped off. So I introduced myself, said, "Jump in." So, and it was about a 10-minute ride from there to the compound that we were living in.
All right. And describe the compound. How big was it? What did it look like?
It was cement and cement walls. At one time, it was a French resort, which it must have been many, many years ago, because you could not see that. So that there were some buildings and some rooms, but yeah, it was. And then you had pillboxes and bunkers, and it was completely surrounded by a wall with barbed wire, and it was just all rice paddies. So that's all you saw, rice paddies everywhere.
Kind of an odd place for a resort at that point.
Exactly. You wonder what were people doing down here? I have no idea.
Maybe the beach was closer in those days. But yeah. Oh, okay. So was this mainly a Vietnamese base?
No, this was American. This was U.S.
All right. And so what was there? I mean, was there an infantry unit there?
No.
Or?
No, it was just our advisory team.
Okay.
And it comprised about, the team itself was, total personnel was about 120. And we had a SEAL team attached to us as well, 10-man SEAL team. So, and as I described, the S1, S2 shop, S3, S4, and then, but essentially we were just supporting and providing support to the Vietnamese, and so we're an advisory team. So each one of those different shops had a comparable Vietnamese shop, so they worked with.
Okay. All right. So were there any Vietnamese personnel on your base, or were they all somewhere else?
Just a couple interpreters. That was it.
All right. Now, were there American units in the province in other places?
No.
So this is pretty much all
No,
at this
at
point?
that point, this was, the term was Vietnamization. And yeah, I think a year or two before, there were probably Marines. You had Navy patrol boats running through there. When I first arrived, I actually roomed with the NILO, the Naval Intelligence Liaison Officer. He was primarily gathering intelligence for the SEAL team so that they could run their discrete operations.
All right. So you get there, you meet people. So what's your job?
I would, probably just to give you chronologically, every afternoon I would get from the Vietnamese agent reports of enemy units, where they were located and activity, movements. And after about a month, I arrived there in November and December. It was more gathering information, finding out about my counterpart and learning about the area. Initially, every morning we had a CIA officer, Australian, in Can Tho itself, and I would drive to his home, and we'd gather some intelligence from him. I'd get the intelligence that I could get from the Vietnamese, and we had a map with overlays, and every day we would plot the enemy units, their locations on the map every day, looking for patterns and trends. And then after a month, I was asked if I wanted to go on what they called a phantom mission, which was they'll give you a Huey helicopter and 2 Cobra gunships, and I'd take my unit sightings and we'd fly. We essentially go over the province and go from coordinate to coordinate wherever these units were, and whatever we found, we put ordnance in, and that was essentially my job. And we were fairly successful. We were very successful with that. It was impressive how accurate the agent reports were that we were receiving, and so they expanded the number of missions that I would run. So rather than 1 or 2 a week, I was running them almost daily or every other day, running those missions, and they could arrive. Typically, they'd come twice a day. Could be first thing in the morning. They'd be out there in the dark, and we'd take off. And then in the afternoon, we'd go up. And so whenever I wasn't flying in the Huey directing those Phantom missions, then starting in January, I flew in an 01 Bird Dog observer, and so we had a bird dog and a CW, a chief warrant officer, stationed at our team also, and so he and I would fly every day, also.
Okay,
so.
And so this is just a little propeller plane. So
yeah, single engine.
Right. Okay.
Right.
And so was that simply observer, or did you have ordnance to?
Yeah, we had 4 rocket pods on each wing, and the rockets that we would use, you had white phosphorus so we could mark targets if we were directing in airstrikes or if we were directing other helicopters, Cobras or whatever it would take. And then we also had VT, which were variable time, so the pilot could adjust if he wanted that to explode before it actually detonated on the ground. And we had four different rockets that we could utilize, and use them all. We used them all.
All right. Now, okay, so was the Bird Dog, was that based on your base?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did the helicopters come from somewhere else?
They came from Can Tho. It was a aviation unit that was headquartered and based in Can Tho. Okay. And so we had, and I think one of the reasons I'm here today is because two primary reasons. One, that we had that SEAL team, and number 2, that we had Cobras that were with us every night, shut down on the airfield, stayed all night long, and then at daylight they would fly back to Can Tho. So the enemy knew that if there was any activity anywhere in the province, those choppers were up and they were directed in on those. So that was our security.
Okay. Now, did you have people who did perimeter security?
Yes. Yes, that was. Those were the locals, the indigenous.
Okay.
And so we had some local. Actually, they were civilians that actually trained and worked with the indigenous Vietnamese, and so they set up perimeters. They set up security for us.
Okay. So the Vietnamese were these regional forces
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, we referred to them as rough puffs.
Yeah, so it's,
Regional, provincial.
right.
Regional forces,
Okay.
provincial
Yeah.
forces.
And how reliable were they?
Initially they were suspect,
Mhm.
but they got into, in the tenure of my time in Kamau and in An Xuyen, those forces went up against some NBA, which were the North Vietnamese, which were regulars,
Yeah.
and they held their own. And of course, we were able to give them air support, which the NBA didn't have. But still, they really became an effective fighting machine.
Okay. And then you were paired with a Vietnamese officer,
Right.
or did you get a rotation of those going through? Or
No.
one? Okay.
No.
So talk about the guy you worked with then.
Oh, he became one of my closest friends. If I have no idea if he's alive today, but yeah, we were very close. Early on, he and I typically on a Saturday morning, we could Saturday or Sunday morning, more typically, we jump in the Jeep, the two of us, put our weapons in the back seat, and just take off into the countryside. And you look back on it and you think about, yeah, these are some foolish things that we did, but we were both so comfortable, and I was comfortable with him and with his relationships and what he knew and people he knew, and so yeah, we were really close.
So what was there to do when you were just looking at stuff, or would he visit people? Or?
Yeah, we would visit people. We would stop and have coffee. It was socializing, and the people were very in that immediate area were very friendly, and the children loved us being there. So it was a wonderful experience.
Okay. Were there, I mean, did the Viet Cong retaliate against people like that? Were there problems with them?
The one thing you did not do was you did it sporadically. There was no routine in what you did, because I mean, there was one time, not me personally, but some others that I associated with, actually water skied on the river, and you could go one way, but you didn't want to come back, because as soon as you did something and they knew that there was a routine to what you were doing, they would take advantage of that. We would, again, for some cooperation locally, we played some volleyball games, we played some basketball games with the Vietnamese in Kamau, and we always got warnings that, okay, you better not do this a second time or a third time, because they're going to set up, they're going to ambush, they're going to create some havoc here. So it had to be spontaneous when you did things like that.
No, but would the civilians that you were associating with, I mean, would they face retaliation, or would the Viet Cong stay away from them?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, not in Kamau. I think there was, when I first arrived, to put it in perspective, when I first arrived, I could go straight up, and I had clearance to fire rockets 360 degrees. We didn't have to get clearance. After I'd been there 4 months, I had to clear with the Vietnamese before I would go out with any of these missions, and I'd have to identify exactly where we were going. So if you want to say Vietnamization was fairly successful in the immediate area of Kamau, I think so. I would say so. I felt pretty safe driving around. It was very rural, but yeah.
Now, did you go anywhere at night or only in the day?
It was during daylight.
Okay. Yeah. But basically so you have to, for much of the time you're there, you have to let the Vietnamese know ahead of time where you're going.
Yeah, after about 4 or 5 months.
But once you got there, but the targets were still there.
That was part of the challenge I had after. The reason we were so successful initially was because I'd have those agent sightings. I could go out either with a Cobra package, or I could go out with the warrant officer and the bird dog, and we could go after those targets. Nobody knew where we were going, other than the fact that I had all these agent reports. And I just, as a matter of fact, we had, just in that plane, we had more of everything, more sampans, more KIAs, more everything than all the Vietnamese units on the ground. And we couldn't report it, because you're not supposed to be able to do that from a single engine bird dog.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, we were extremely successful. And then at the end of about 4 or 5 months, then before I could go up and do anything, they required me to have clearance from the Vietnamese. And so unfortunately though, when you're over a target, and now we had to call in to get clearance before we could go in on the target, even though we were in a, absolutely enemy controlled area, we'd lose the spontaneity, the ability. And so then they decided, okay, we'll put a Vietnamese in the helicopter with you, and he can make on-site determinations. And he still was not successful in doing that for me, because you had to react. And so I put him on the opposite side of the helicopter from where I was observing the action. I was making decisions, which I had always done, and then would report to him what had just taken place, and then he could report it back. So, I mean, there's no point in doing this if you can't be, the immediacy of the action requires that.
So he either couldn't spot the things or just didn't want to give an order?
Exactly. Would not confirm. Yeah. You can put those Cobras on that target. No, he didn't want that responsibility.
Okay.
And so it was like, that's why we're here. That's why I'm up here. That's why I'm putting these guys in on these targets.
Because I guess one of the standard assumptions in a lot of cases is that if we were alerting the Vietnamese to what we were doing,
Yes.
then the enemy always knew,
Yes.
And could be somewhere else.
Yes.
But at least but it sounds like when you were flying these missions, even I guess now at the point during the period when you were telling them at clearing ahead of time, would you go out there and there wouldn't be anybody there?
Not really, because I would only give them a certain amount of time. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the enemy had agents within the intel shop, the Vietnamese intel shop. Not my counterpart, not the captain, but some of the enlisted people, because there were some operations that we had that were rather sophisticated. And when we actually went out to move on the target was gone, and we knew it had been there the day before, and then it was gone. And so that convinced me. Now there's only a certain amount, and that was one of the reasons why the NILO, the Naval Intelligence, he would not share intelligence information with me, because he was concerned it would get back to the Vietnamese, and then it would not be successful for them.
All right. Now, did the SEAL team operate out of the base the whole time you were there? Or did
Yes.
They? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And do you have any idea what they were doing?
It was primarily, specifically no, but their function was to more take out individual leadership targets in these units, and so they weren't daily doing this, and they were typically running operations at night. They might run one a week. But interestingly, the entire time I was there, we had 2 different SEAL teams. Time I was there was only one casualty, and that was a fellow was wounded from air support, from U.S. air support. That was the only casualty in the entire year I was there. And they went into some bad areas and some rather delicate operations.
Okay. All right. Because by then we had things like the Phoenix program and so forth. Where
That's exactly what they were. That was their primary
basically
function.
trying to take out enemy leadership and,
Yes.
and so forth.
Yes.
At that point. All right. Now, the base itself, did that ever get targeted by the enemy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it was second night I was there, actually. It was about 2 in the morning, and all of a sudden I wake up and I hear the shrapnel heading off the shutters of the room that I was in, and I was like, okay. That's probably the most scared I've been in my life. And that was my first realization, okay, I've only been there 2 days, and we got mortared. So, yeah, and I mean, we couldn't get to the bunkers. We couldn't get anywhere to protect ourselves. And you don't know if this is a all-out attack or what they're doing. Well, it turned out that we had a resupply convoy that would come down once a month. Convoy had come down, and they would stay at night and drive back the next day. So they were actually targeting that convoy, not us. And so, but I made a point. I knew exactly, I determined pretty quickly where that mortar position was, who the unit was, plotted that on the map. And so the last thing I would do when we flew at night, late afternoon, early evening, the last thing I would do would, for some of those units and the coordinates, when I knew they moved into areas where they had hit us before, or where we knew that they were in attack position, then the last thing I would do would be fly over that, and just to confirm that, okay, they're not mounting an attack on us. And we never got hit again. There were harassing things that were done, but we never got mortared again in the year I was there. So.
Okay. And the perimeter didn't get probed by anybody?
No.
Okay.
No, we had, again, those Cobras, they knew they had the Cobras. I mean, there are things, I look back on it now, and why didn't they do there? There were things that I had to do, and I'm thinking, why didn't anybody try and take me out? I have no explanation for that, but having those Cobras there and having that SEAL team right there, immediately attached to us, they knew the kind of firepower that we had, and so, no, we didn't. Yeah, we were fortunate.
All right. Now, did you pretty much stay within that province the whole year that you were there?
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, as far as my function, I would have to go up to Can Tho to get the funds for the agents, and but as far as running operations, it was strictly in the province.
Okay.
Yeah.
Getting funds for the agents. Talk a little bit about your relationship with the agents and what you're doing with them.
It was all done through the Vietnamese. So I would go to Can Tho, which was the capital of the Delta, go to an office, and they would give me a briefcase with a certain amount of money I'd have to sign for in piastres, Vietnamese currency, and then bring that back to Kamau and give that to the Vietnamese. Did that every month.
Okay. And would you go to them, or did they come to the base, or?
No, it was right at the shop right there.
Okay. Okay.
That we shared together.
Okay.
So I'd bring it right to them. But I mean, the absurdity, the one aspect of it, the absurdity of it was not in a good area. It was of Can Tho, where we would go to get these funds. And here's an officer with no weapon, no security, no ability to provide security, and handed a briefcase with thousands of dollars of piastres. And when I first got there, I had a .45 that they had issued me, but with the Vietnamization, they needed that. They needed so many other things to provide the support to the Vietnamese, so I had to give my weapon up. I had to give my .45 up, and so I had no sidearm, and so there were other like myself that resorted to these what they call Saigon cowboys. These guys would come up on their motorbikes and just grab the briefcase and then just drive off. And there were other guys that I knew, officers, that ended up throwing rocks at these guys, anything they could, just to try and stop them. I mean, it was just.
Okay. But you managed not to be harassed.
I don't know. It was my size. I don't know. No, they never tried it with me.
All right. And did you have occasion ever to go up to Saigon or anything like that?
Yes, we. My roommate was the S3, and he was a captain. And so the nice thing about his rank and his responsibility, and then my rank as an intelligence officer, was nobody could really question where we were, what we were doing. And so he would write us orders at period of time, and we'd jump on a plane and go up to Saigon, spent some time there, went to Vung Tau, which was the in-country R&R, spent a few days there, and so had some flexibility. Traveled somewhat through Vietnam, went up to Dalat, which is where the Vietnamese officer candidate school was, training, and Cam Ranh Bay, and so we had some flexibility to be able to do that, and which which was nice, just to be able to get a little diversion from the day-to-day. But the one thing I would say is, you know, as much as we were in the boondocks, there was no saluting, and you know, when I went back up to Saigon, and you realize you might as well be on a U.S. base, you know, it was all the saluting and everything else that was going on. I was like, no, and the guys that had actually been initially assigned there and thought, okay, this is a cake job for us, they all regretted. By when I would see them, I'd say, hey, can I switch? Can I swap jobs with you? You know, but so I look back on it and I'm happy I was where I was.
All right. Well, who was in charge of your base?
It was a Lieutenant Colonel Sawyer.
Mm-hmm.
He was the province senior advisor, PSA.
Was he there the full year, or did he rotate
Yes.
out? Okay.
Yeah, he was there. He was there when I got there, and he was there when I left. Although I understand from the fellow that replaced me in a letter that was maybe 2 or 3 months after I left that he was reassigned.
Okay. Because normally in assignment, people are there for a year and they move on.
Yes.
But it may be that in certain capacities they either
I
extend
think so,
or.
and I think it was his choice
Mhm.
too. Yeah, he had a pretty I don't know, it was a good job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Now you were there during the period of the Cambodian incursion in 1970.
Yeah.
Now you're at the far southern tip of South Vietnam, which is
Right.
away from the actual Cambodian border.
Yes.
But were there ripple effects or things that you saw relating to that?
When even before the actual invasion took place, we were Ralph and myself were flying, and just for our own curiosity, we thought, let's just go up a little further north outside of our province, and we did, and we saw these regular troops, regular NVA, just in formation, just moving away from the border, going west, and there was such intensity, and you could see the motivation on their part just to go. They could have cared less that we were flying over them and observing them, and they just kept marching. And it was,
So you're marching, you said, away from the border, away from the province border,
yes,
but toward the Cambodian border,
yeah,
basically.
into Cambodia. They were
Yeah.
marching into Cambodia. Yeah, yeah. So whether or not they were being moved to provide support for that invasion that was about to begin, I don't know.
Mhm.
But but that was quite a sight, because most of anytime I would have these phantom missions or these helicopters would come down, inevitably they'd always say to me, Lieutenant, can you find us troops on the ground? We want troops on the ground.
Mhm.
And because they wanted, knowing that they were going in on so many targets, they wanted to be able to record it so they
Mhm.
could have some confirmation of exactly what they were accomplishing. And it was always a challenge. Yeah, there were many times that we would find that, but you might find 4, 6, 8, 10. That would be max. In this case, you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, and it was like I had never seen anything like that, you know. And it corroborated all the intelligence that we'd been gathering about the numbers
Right.
that we had, not only in our province, but the numbers that were along the border coming down that Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got North Vietnamese regulars down there, and they're
Yes.
not just Viet Cong or whatever. Yeah.
No.
And now, when you saw that, did you call in anything on them, or did
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we reported what we saw. But I think at that point, it was that was later in my tour,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was more the responsibility of the Vietnamese to react to that,
Okay.
and it wasn't like we were putting in U.S. airstrikes or U.S. helicopters. At that point, it was Vietnamese. The
Okay.
Vietnamese had taken over that function.
All right. So you have no idea what happened after
I do
that.
not know. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess, how much confidence did you have in the ability of the Vietnamese to be able to kind of take over the war?
Where I was, it was a very, very competent, the S2, that S2 shop, that Vietnamese S2 shop, as they say, I was an advisor, but the reality was I was really liaison, providing funding for them, and then reporting what in our missions that we were running with the Cobras, or I was running with the Bird Dog, reporting what we found. But no, they were extremely competent in the province where I was.
Okay. Yeah. But there was still a substantial enemy presence there.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
Much more so than either that PSA, that lieutenant colonel wanted me to admit in or communicate in intelligence briefings.
Mhm.
We would have pacification conferences every month, and it was like my second month, and the S2 was, I was the assistant S2 when I first got there. The S2 had gone either on leave or R&R, so I was the one providing the intelligence situation. And we could have, one of those conferences, we had the ambassador to Vietnam, you'd have newspaper people, you'd have government people that would come down. And so each, the S1, S2, S3, S4, each one of us would have a certain period of time that we would provide, the state of the state, essentially.
Mhm.
And the colonel and I never really saw eye to eye because I told it the way it was. I'm flying over this province every day. I know what the state of the enemy situation is, and it didn't coincide with what the Vietnamization communication that was being provided back to the States. It didn't corroborate what I really found. And so at one point in one of those conferences, he said to me, "Lieutenant," I was a second lieutenant at that point, he said, "Lieutenant, remember your rank, sit down." He sat me down. That was the last time I briefed in one of those conferences because he just didn't trust that I was going to give the policy briefing that they wanted.
Okay, so explain a little bit kind of what the context of this is going on. I mean, a pacification conference. What are you trying to establish?
Essentially, it's again the state of what the situation is as far as our ability to have trained the Vietnamese in taking over responsibility for the war. And in anticipation of you and I getting together, I read through some of my letters, and the letter that I wrote the second day I was in the country, I was still in Saigon, and I must have gone to a briefing, and in that letter I was writing this to my folks, and I pretty much said, yeah, we're probably going to be here longer than we think, but this whole policy seems to be working, and the training of the Vietnamese to take over this, it's probably going to be longer than we thought. Well, a letter that I wrote 6 months later in May pretty much said, this is ludicrous. The amount of money that we're spending, it's not happening. We're training peasants, we're training people that have been working with water buffaloes. We're putting them in planes, giving them all kinds of weaponry. They have no responsibility for it, no accountability for it, and we're wasting our time. So that was a 6 months, and my comment was, I don't want you to think I'm going to come back home and I'm going to be marching in parades, but it's just this is not a worthwhile endeavor.
Okay, so what would have needed to be done differently to make it work better?
Well, I think what Ralph and I, in our plane, were waging war, as it was, I think, intended to be. Okay, you find out where the enemy is, and you go after him, and you eliminate him before he eliminates you. As opposed to after, as I said, 4 to 5 months, now I have to get clearance. These targets are still enemy targets. They haven't changed. We haven't done anything out there in some of those rural areas to convert these people to, their loyalty to the Vietnamese. I mean, they're still, if the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese are paying them more money and are providing the support that they think is more important for their lives, then that's who they will support. Until you have control, and they did not have control in those rural areas, it still was going to be a long way off. So And I'm sure that that was fairly typical of every province in the country.
Yeah. I mean, you've actually given a sort of more positive assessment of what the Vietnamese were capable of than some other people have from other places. Because I guess at least your local forces in your area were able to provide security. You could drive on the roads during the day, and
Yes.
you could carry your money around and nobody took it.
Yes.
So there was,
Yes.
on some level it was functioning. As far as you can tell, the civilian population wasn't really being intimidated too badly by the Viet Cong, or there
Right.
weren't people getting executed or things like that
Yes.
in that area. Yeah. Okay. So did you leave the country on R&R?
Yes.
Okay.
The fellows that I was in training with, we all decided that we were going to save our leave in R&R until the very end of the tour.
Mm-hmm.
Let's survive this thing. Let's endure this, and then it'll make the end of go much more quickly
Okay.
for us. So we went to Thailand in August of '69.
Or 70 probably.
Excuse me, 70. August of 70, and then Australia in October.
So you got 2 R&Rs.
Yeah, my again, the advantage I had was that you got an R&R,
Mm-hmm.
which was compliments of the Army.
Yeah.
And I took a week's leave for my second trip, vacation, to Australia. And because my roommate was an S3, he said, "Barry, I'm not going to charge you for this."
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to get essentially 2 R&Rs.
So what was it like to leave Vietnam for a while and go off on these trips?
One thing to put it in perspective, and I thought about this, because again, you fly out of Saigon, and we flew at night, and we were coming from all areas of Vietnam, and I coordinated with the guys that I'd gone through basic with, so we all went together. But we all got in that airplane, civilian airplane, probably about 9, 10 o'clock at night. As the plane was rolling down the runway, and it's at night, so you've got your lights on and you've got the shades on the windows. All of a sudden, we had started at some point in the plane where the shade on the window, they started coming down, okay? Everybody just, all of us, we all thought, yep, the last thing we want to do, we're about to have a vacation, the last thing we want to do is provide a target for any enemy that might be out there. And so here we are, we're flying at night, everybody's bringing down the window shades. So that kind of put it in perspective. The time that you're there, there's an underlying underlying anxiety. You can't totally relax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you have some light moments, but the reality is there is that underlying anxiety. Not until you get in that plane, until that plane is out of Vietnam airspace. When that pilot made that cheer went up, and then it's probably the first time you can say, okay, safe. Yeah, so.
All right. And which trip did you like better?
The Thailand. Bangkok was, without a doubt, it was, I love Asia. I love Asians. I love the food. I love the culture. And that was quite an experience. And then when we went to Australia, it was to some degree anticlimactic, because it was only a month later that I was going home. But also very special. But certainly Thailand was a beautiful country, beautiful experience, wonderful experience.
Okay. All right. Now, talk a little bit about, there's this fellow, Ralph, that you mentioned.
Ralph.
He's a warrant officer
Yes.
who was flying the Bird Dog.
Yes.
Describe him a little bit.
He was Mormon, and the Mormon religion, you can't smoke or drink, but didn't prevent him from being able to kill. And the one thing I found when I first started flying, there were two bird dog pilots. One was a lieutenant, Army lieutenant, and then Ralph, who was the chief warrant. And the one thing you realize quickly is if you're going in on an enemy target, you're diving in on that target. And if you don't put that ordnance on the target, so you're starting at 2,000 feet, you're diving in on the target. It's like coming in on a roller coaster, coming over the top of a roller coaster. When you're diving in from 2,000 feet, you're going probably about 120 miles an hour. When you pull out, you're going about 60 miles an hour. If you haven't put that ordnance on that target, you're probably gonna get shot. So my realization was Ralph was just, and here's a guy flying a bird dog, won two distinguished flying crosses, two at DFCs, flying a bird dog.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty unusual. And one of them when I was flying with him. And he was, I mean, the things, and I never knew. I mean, he would pretty much be spontaneous. I'd put him out to certain coordinates, and if he saw something, he didn't say, okay, we're going in. It was just all of a sudden, the front end of the plane just drops, and he's diving in on a target. And so I would lift myself out of the chair. Like, I'm not going to get shot in my butt, whatever's going to go here. But, yeah, and that was every day. I mean, we were pretty much doing that. You never get comfortable with that, knowing when we're diving in on something, something's probably going to be shooting back at us.
All right. Did your plane ever get hit?
6 times.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And early on, one of the rounds when we got back, we looked at it, and the round had hit a strut, or it would have an engine strut, or it would have gone right through his head. So he said to me, I think we better instruct you how to bring this plane in if something happens to me. So for about a week, I took flying lessons from him. Now, I wasn't going to take off. I probably would have crash landed, but at least I could have brought the plane back to the airfield. But yeah.
All right. Now, did the other plane have? I mean, did that ever get hit worse, or you were worried that if you weren't with Ralph, you might get hit?
Well, the other pilot, he was having marital problems, and he went back to Texas to try and resolve it, and it was not able to do that, and so he just was not taking precautions. You're supposed to fly at 2,000 feet. We'd be flying at 1,000 feet. He's going in on targets at a much lower level. And actually, it wasn't me, but he got reported, and so he lost his wings, and they brought him back to Saigon. So rather than having 2 planes, we only had 1 plane.
Okay, so they didn't replace him.
They didn't replace him. No.
All right.
So.
And then, did you have a helicopter pilot you flew with regularly, or did they rotate?
The companies they rotated those. Yeah, they'd come down. As I said, every day, every other day, we'd have, and so usually the duration was about 2.5 hours, and then they'd have to go back and refuel. So usually it was first thing in the morning, and then mid-afternoon into the early evening. And they couldn't refuel. We didn't have a fuel option for them at Kamau, so they'd have to go back to Can Tho.
All right. So good. Thinking back over that year that you spent in Vietnam, are there other particular incidents or impressions that kind of stand out in your memory that we haven't talked about yet?
Just a couple things. One of which is, probably when I heard about this opportunity, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, I probably would not have pursued this, the opportunity to speak with you. But, and I think for a number of reasons, I think you hear often that if you've been in combat, that you're reluctant to talk about it, talk about it with your family. And I think I really came to this, I think, it's my own personal belief, but I think it applies to more, is that you internalize so much of that. that, and there's this macho male image, and you, when you start talking about certain things, you just become emotional and you start crying.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a real challenge to talk about some of the, I mean, there's a lot that you could talk about, but you don't. You try and remember the lighter moments. So that's one aspect of this. The other is, I'm 73. 72, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. My roommate, matter of fact, four of the 5 guys that I was closest to, we still get together every year. Every one of us has come down with cancer at this point in our lives. And the Army has me on permanent disability, or the government has me on permanent disability. And so you become an advocate, because I think the reality is in the province where I was, with those base areas, the foliage was so dense that they used Agent Orange rather extensively. And whether or not you were in direct contact with it, the food sources and everything else, any number of ways that you did come in contact with it. And I think they've come to the conclusion that if we were in Vietnam, you probably had exposure and you're probably going to be susceptible to having some kind of cancer. So,
All right.
yeah.
How would you characterize morale among the people in your unit?
The highlight of my day was putting an X on the calendar. It was one less day that I had to spend there. You know, fortunately, because I was an officer and because of my ability to get in a plane and fly somewhere, I could, you know, I had some control of it. It was, unless you were career military, and I was ROTC, you know, when people say to me, thanks for your service, quite honestly, my response has always been, you know, it was my job, right? I was going to be drafted. I was told I had to go, had to do it. I was going to do it to the best of my ability, which is what I think I did. But it was, yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult at most. That's the longest year of your life.
Yeah. And did you have enlisted personnel on the base who really couldn't go anywhere? Or
Pardon?
did you have enlisted personnel on the base who really couldn't go anywhere?
Yes.
You could get up and fly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we did.
And I don't know, what was their attitude?
Well, we were a small team. I mean, 100 might not seem that way, 120, but we were a small team, and so, and drugs were not really a problem. There were a few enlisted that got into some heavy drugs, heroin and cocaine, but we all knew that we were dependent upon one another, so you know, and relying on one another, so you couldn't let your buddy down. And so it was, you got through it the best you could, and it was survival. That's what you did. You just got through that year.
Okay. And what was the ethnic mix of the unit? Were you pretty much all white, or did you have?
Primarily. Yeah, it was primarily. We had a few minorities, but for the most part, it was all white. And when we would travel to other areas, especially at that time, there was a lot of racial tension. There wasn't a lot of respect for officers, white officers. And so, but not where I was, not in the small team that I was on. And but it was pretty apparent when we would travel to Can Tho or travel to certainly Saigon. Yeah, it was not a good situation.
All right. So you get to the end now of that year. We get to the end of 1970. Now it's time for you to go back to the States. So what's the process for getting you out?
You get the orders, and actually I had about a week or two less than the year, which was a kind of a bonus when I got my orders. And so you just as you would come down from Saigon to Can Tho to Kamau, I went back the same way, Can Tho to Saigon, and then well, I had received my order saying that I would be, when I left Vietnam, I was to report to Fort Bragg, Special Forces, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and be assigned to a Special Forces unit as an intel shop.
Okay. All right. And then do you fly commercial again when you leave, or?
It was charter,
Yeah.
and again, it was same Yokota to Anchorage to
Did you go to San Francisco or Seattle?
no, San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you get to go home for a while before you go to Fort Bragg?
Yeah, fortunately, I got home in about the middle of like the 10th or 11th of November and didn't have to report until after the 1st of January.
Okay.
So I actually had about 6 weeks off.
All right.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of back in the States. You're not out of the Army yet. But
Right.
for a while there, you're kind of back home and don't have to be in uniform or whatever. And what was that experience like?
You know, they talk about, of course, here I am, you know, my hair's still short, even though I was in civilian clothes. It's pretty apparent that I'm military.
Mm-hmm.
And my roommate at Sears was in a graduate program at C.W. Post College in Nassau County. And so we went on campus, took me on campus, and I had somebody walk up to me and spit at me.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about that experience, yeah, I did have that one scenario where just out of the absolute blue, just walks up to me, just spits at me, and walks on. That was it. No comment, nothing was said, just, yeah. But no, other than that, it was, you know, I knew that the length of my commitment was 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I was very comfortable. It was just, I can remember the one emotional, think about it, what your parents go through.
Mm-hmm.
And my folks, when they met me at Kennedy, and I came off the plane, and I can remember my mother saying, "It's finally over."
Mm-hmm.
Finally over. So that, you know, that whole year, you're, you know, you're surviving and you're trying to communicate with them, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then, so just as you have that anxiety level, that is the same for them, you know. So, but then, you know, you pretty much get back into your normal routine, and you. Then I went back. I reported the guys that I was with. We all were assigned to my closest friends to Fort Bragg. So we all went down there.
Okay. So there's still, you're not going to, in a way, it's not totally new. At least you know some of the people who were there along with you.
Yes.
Okay. So what did you actually do at Fort Bragg while you were there?
It was a, believe it or not, it was an intelligence. So it's special forces. Army Special Forces, but we were gathering intelligence for this unit. Their area of specialization was the Middle East. And of course, the Middle East, there was nothing going on in the Middle East at that time. So here we are, most of our day is trying to gather intelligence. Where do you get it? You get it from Time Magazine, you get it from news articles and everything else. So that's where we're gathering all this information. So it was really just marking time, putting time in. And so at the end of, pretty much the end, I had about a month left. And the captain, who was a regular Army, great guy, and not college, I mean, just a regular Army captain, calls us in, my roommate and myself. He says, "Lieutenant, what are your thoughts? Your time is coming up." He says, "What would it take to keep you in? You're the kind of guys," because I think my buddies and I going through ROTC, not so gung-ho military as, let's say, West Point or OCS, and he said, "You're the kind of guys we need to stay in." He said, "What would it take?" And I said, "Well, if you could guarantee me a year or so in Thailand, I might consider that." And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, and I thought about it, and I said, "Yeah, I think I might be serious," right? So he came back to me about a week or two later, and he said, "I don't have good news." said, what's that? He said, well, the best I can do is guarantee you another year here at Fort Bragg, and then you're going back to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm not rolling those dice again.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. But yeah, it was pretty much ROTC. It was a 6-year commitment, 2 years of active duty, and then 4 years of reserve.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, between the downsizing of the troop requirement in Vietnam, they pretty much, when you were finished, if you had been in a combat zone, when you were finished, they pretty much waived that 4-year reserve commitment.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to report to a reserve unit, that was fine. If I didn't, that was fine too. So.
Because in general, at that point, I mean, did you get promoted to captain right as you left?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
And basically, they had way too many captains in the early 70s. A lot of them got riffed anyway.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
unless you were really well connected, you might not have lasted anyway.
Quite honestly, Jim, I have no idea why they gave me that promotion. It came up. They sent me this letter and said, okay, whatever. Maybe they looked at my records. I don't know, but they said, you qualify for a promotion to the grade of captain.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Would you accept it?
Okay.
And I thought, okay, who knows? At some point in the future, for retirement purposes or whatever, So I acknowledged that, and yeah.
All right. So now we get into middle of '71. You're out of the Army.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you go back to Sears, or what do you do?
We the 4 that I was closest to, we took leave in R&R together. We decided, okay, we've seen the United States, because when we were going through basic and that, we had done some travel in the United States. We'd seen Asia. We said, all right, before we go back to, I was going back to Sears, and each one of them had a job they were going back to. We thought, all right, let's go to Europe. So we took 2 months and went to Europe, traveled through Europe for 2 months.
Okay, so what countries did you go to?
Started in Germany, Austria, Italy, came back up through France, the Netherlands, and then England.
Okay. So at this point, did you still look kind of military? Or at least people could look at you and figure you were probably...
Probably not.
Okay.
No, the sideburns had come down
so you're
significantly,
going
the hair was growing,
Okay.
and yeah. So.
And how were people treating Americans at that point?
Military?
Well,
Oh,
how
you
they
mean
treated
in
just generally? You were a tourist now, but...
Okay, well, we were traveling through Europe. We, one of the reasons I went for the intelligence branch was my language in high school and college was German.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke fairly decent German.
Okay.
And so when we were traveling through Europe, I used German.
Mm-hmm.
There were 4 of us, 2 of us spoke pretty fluent German. And so if we were going for a pension or we were looking for anything, we would ask in German first before we would acknowledge that we were Americans. And they never really knew whether we were Canadians or Americans, but it never really was too awkward or too difficult. Other than that, just doing some of the negotiating.
Yeah,
if we had to.
Okay. And so now you do that, and then you come back. So you go back to Sears in Pittsburgh?
Yes.
Okay. And how long did you stay with them?
Probably in total about a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. I found it, I think the experience I had in the military influenced me to some degree in a number of ways. One of which was all the travel I'd done, all the independence I had, and Sears was so structured at that point. And I just found it, the structural part of Sears in comparison to the military was not something I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was not, it was not something that was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about a year and a half, 2 years, and then about a year later I found a position with Stanley Tools in sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really started my career, my civilian career.
Okay. And then did you stay in sales, or did you move on to other
I
things?
Yeah. I went into sales management with them. I was with Stanley about 8 years, and then started my own company, and this manufacturer's rep agency. So I've been doing that for 30 years.
All right. And how did you wind up in West Michigan?
I was with Stanley. I was headquartered. Well, I started in Pittsburgh was Sears, and Stanley transferred me to Philly, transferred me to Indianapolis, and then Chicago. And at one point, I was actually had responsibility for people working for me in Michigan, and met a fellow that had a manufacturer's rep agency, and he said, if you ever decide that corporate life isn't for you, and you want to give something else a shot, contact me. And in the mid-'80s, when the last major recession took place, I was a district manager and middle management. One day, they let 13 of us go, and so I contacted him, and I said, hey, if that opportunity still exists, I'd be interested in. So that's what brought me over here.
All right.
Yeah.
Now you'd mentioned that you got what is likely some effects of Agent Orange. Do you think that you have any sort of the psychological carryover from Vietnam?
I don't think so. I can tell you this, that when I first got there, I slept with a sidearm, a revolver by my bed, and there were a number of incidents that we had when I was using that machine gun, and I can't fire a weapon anymore. I have no interest. I can't even shoot skeet. I really can't watch combat movies. I have nightmares, and so it's there. As I said, there are things you internalize, and it's not. My son and his girlfriend came in for Thanksgiving, and we were watching a segment with on the Food Network, and they were doing something in North Vietnam. And my son even said to me, Dad, he wants to turn it to something else? And I said, nah, it's fine. It's essentially just a travel log.
Yeah.
Yeah, that night I woke up and I was like, whew, I was almost in a sweat. It was ridiculous. These little triggers, little things that still, occur.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, and an experience like that doesn't go away.
No, that's quite apparent. So I try and avoid those things. People will say to me, like that Vietnam series that came on, did you watch that? I said, no, I really didn't. I really, even books and things like that, it's just, I just try and avoid that. So.
Okay. So what made you decide to come to an interview then?
Well, two things. Number one, this is the 50th anniversary of my being there. And so I started reading my letters. I wrote about 50 letters home. My mother kept all my letters. And I had, I've started reading them, and I just thought when I received that communication, I thought, you know what, I think maybe if there's something that I can share, maybe there are others. But this with the cancer is the other thing, that if there's any way that I think when this occurs, you realize I've got to be an advocate. I've got to communicate. Anybody that's spent any time or associated with Vietnam at that time, that you need to be very diligent. You need to be making sure that you're getting physicals, and when you're getting that physical, that you're having that PSA checked. And in my case, I had my physical a year ago in like June, July, and there was early detection that there might be some issues. My PSA was somewhat elevated, but everybody always assumes, you're going to die from something else. And I went back 6 months later, and I have the aggressive form, so you can never make an assumption. And I just keep saying, if you've had it, and if your PSN number is, just don't assume. Just make sure you're getting it, and it can move that quickly in 6 months, as mine did. So that's probably the primary motivation here, is just anyone that's been there, and that we're really all advocates for the safety and security. We survived that. Yeah. So it's like, okay.
All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a pretty good story. So thank you very much for coming in and sharing it.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure meeting you in this experience.